And as you close your eyes, imagine the medieval doctor, his gaze fixed on the twinkling stars, deciphering the secrets of your mind from the silent dance of the planets. It's a reminder that for centuries, humanity looked to the heavens not just for wonder, but for answers, for healing, and for a deeper understanding of the mysterious workings of madness. It's a comforting thought, in a way that even in their limited understanding, they sought to connect the smallest human ailment to the grandest cosmic design. Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights and drift back to a time when your sanity wasn't just a state of mind, but a delicate dance of bodily fluids. Imagine, if you will, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across a medieval physician's study. The air is thick with the scent of dried herbs and something vaguely metallic. You're feeling a bit off, not quite yourself. Perhaps a touch too melancholic, or maybe a little too boisterous for polite society. And in this era, your doctor isn't reaching for a prescription pad, but rather a keen eye for your complexion, the warmth of your skin, and perhaps a quick sniff of your, well, let's just say, your general emanations. It's a world where a bad mood could literally be a problem with your blood. And a fever wasn't just a fever, but an excess of fiery yellow bile. You'd probably not survive this era, honestly, but it's fascinating to ponder. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, if you're listening from somewhere cozy, maybe drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always cool to see where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've navigated the cosmic influences on your medieval mind, understanding how the stars themselves could dictate your sanity. Now, let's bring our focus back down to Earth, to the very substance that sustained you, and the rhythm of your daily existence. Imagine a world where your breakfast, your bedtime, and even your morning stroll weren't just mundane routines, but carefully considered components of your mental well-being. This is where we uncover the surprising everyday adjustments prescribed for mental health in the Middle Ages. Delving into the profound impact of diet and lifestyle, you find yourself in a world governed by the ancient wisdom of Hippocrates and Galen, thinkers whose ideas, born centuries before, still held absolute sway. For the medieval mind, the human body was a microcosm of the universe, and just as the cosmos had its four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, so too did your very being consist of four fundamental humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humor was associated with specific qualities. Blood was hot and moist, linked to the element of air. Phlegm, cold and moist, akin to water. Yellow bile, hot and dry, like fire. And black bile, cold and dry, mirroring earth. Your health, your temperament, even your very personality, was believed to be a perfect symphony of these four fluids. When they were in balance, you were well, both physically and mentally. But when this delicate equilibrium was disturbed, when one humor became too abundant or too scarce, that's when trouble brewed, manifesting as illness, and most pertinent to our journey tonight, as a madness. In the medieval view, your body was a complex machine, constantly processing and reacting to what you put into it and how you moved it. If your humors were out of balance, it wasn't just the stars or a trapped demon that was to blame. It was often what you ate, how much you slept, and even the air you breathed. Physicians, therefore, acted as holistic lifestyle coaches, prescribing not just remedies, but entire regimens designed to gently nudge your humors back into equilibrium. It's like a medieval wellness retreat, but instead of green juice and yoga, you're getting specific foods and very particular walks. Imagine a physician, perhaps a kindly, albeit serious, man with a long, flowing beard, examining you. He doesn't ask about your feelings or your thoughts in the way a modern therapist might. Instead, he observes your physical state with an intense focus. Are your cheeks flushed that might indicate an excess of blood, making you sanguine, perhaps overly optimistic or even prone to fits of rage? Is your skin pale and clammy? Perhaps phlegm is in abundance, leading to a sluggish, melancholic disposition. A yellowish tint to your eyes or skin could point to an excess of choler or yellow bile, making you irritable and prone to anger. And a deep, brooding sadness, A persistent melancholy was almost certainly attributed to an overabundance of black bile, the most feared of the humors, often associated with madness. It's like a medieval version of a personality quiz, but with much higher stakes. Oh, you're feeling a bit irritable today? Must be that fiery yellow bile acting up again? We'll fix that with a good purge. Imagine your physician, after a thorough consultation, handing you a detailed list. It's not just about herbs or purges anymore. He might tell you to avoid certain cold and dry foods if you're suffering from melancholy, or to abstain from hot and moist meats if you're prone to fits of anger. Every bite, every sip, was scrutinized for its humoral qualities. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was medicine, a powerful tool to manipulate the delicate balance within you. It's like a medieval nutritionist, but instead of counting calories, they're counting humors. Oh, you're feeling a bit phlegmatic today. No more cold. Damp fish for you. We're putting you on a strict diet of roasted chicken and warm, dry spices. The common historical fact here is the pervasive and enduring belief in the humoral theory. For over a millennium, from ancient Greece through the Middle Ages and even into the early modern period, this was the bedrock of all medical understanding. It wasn't just a theory, it was the theory. The lens through which every ailment, every disposition, every deviation from the norm was understood. It influenced everything from diet to daily routines, from the timing of surgical procedures to the very colors worn by the sick. You couldn't escape the humors. They were the air you breathed, the food you ate, and the very essence of your being. The common historical fact here is the fundamental importance of dietetics in medieval medicine. Building on the teachings of Hippocrates and Galen, medieval physicians believed that food was the primary means by which humors were produced and maintained. Therefore, regulating a patient's diet was often the first and most continuous line of treatment for any ailment, including madness. It wasn't just about what not to eat, but also about what to eat, in what quantities, and even how it was prepared. This emphasis on diet was pervasive, influencing everything from royal banquets to peasant meals. So, if your physician diagnosed an imbalance, what was the prescription? It wasn't always a gentle suggestion to take it easy. Often it involved direct, sometimes drastic, intervention to reestablish that precious balance. The most common and perhaps most infamous method was bloodletting. If you had too much blood, perhaps you were experiencing a fever or a sudden burst of manic energy, then the solution was simple: let some of it out. This could be done by opening a vein with a lancet, or more commonly, by applying leeches. Picture a handful of slimy, wriggling leeches being placed on your skin, slowly engorging themselves with your excess blood. The sensation? You can imagine wasn't exactly pleasant. It was believed that removing the offending humor would restore equilibrium, calming the agitated mind or cooling the fevered body. It was like draining a bathtub that was overflowing, but the bathtub was you. Beyond food, the medieval physician also considered the 6 non-naturals a crucial concept in their medical philosophy. These were 6 factors external to the body that profoundly influenced its internal state air: food and drink, sleep and waking, exercise and rest, excretion and retention, and the passions of the mind. Madness, being a profound imbalance, was seen as particularly susceptible to these external influences. Therefore, managing your daily routine, your environment, and your emotional state was just as vital as any potion or procedure. It was a comprehensive approach to health, encompassing your entire daily existence. Another popular method was purging, either through emetics to induce vomiting or purgatives to induce, well, a thorough cleansing of the bowels. If the problem was an excess of yellow bile, a bitter concoction designed to make you throw up might be prescribed. If black bile was the culprit, a strong laxative was in order. The idea was to physically expel the humor that was causing the imbalance. You can almost taste the foul, earthy mixtures, feel the churning in your stomach, and the sheer relief or perhaps exhaustion after the treatment had run its course. It was a very hands-on approach to internal medicine. Feeling blue? Let's get that black bile out of you, one way or another. Let's talk about air. It wasn't just about breathing. It was about the quality of the air you inhabited. If you were suffering from a melancholic disposition, believed to be caused by cold, dry black bile, you might be advised to live in a warm, moist environment. perhaps near a flowing river or in a well-ventilated room. Conversely, someone with an excess of hot, fiery yellow bile might be encouraged to seek cooler, drier climates. Physicians might even recommend burning specific aromatic woods or herbs to purify the air around you, believing that the very atmosphere could influence your humors. It's like a medieval air purifier, but instead of a HEPA filter, it's a pile of burning rosemary. Beyond these more aggressive interventions, diet played a crucial role. Foods were categorized by their humoral qualities. Hot and moist foods like bread and wine were good for those with an excess of cold and dry black bile. Cold and dry foods like cucumbers might be prescribed for someone suffering from an excess of hot and moist blood. It was a complex system, requiring the physician to be not just a doctor, but a culinary expert. Imagine your medieval doctor telling you, "We're no more roasted pheasant for you. My friend, you're clearly too sanguine. We're putting you on a strict diet of cold, watery vegetables until your humors settle." It sounds almost like a modern fad diet, doesn't it? Except the stakes were your sanity. Sleep and waking patterns were also meticulously managed. Insomnia, or excessive sleepiness, were both seen as signs of humoral imbalance. If you couldn't sleep due to an agitated mind, excess yellow bile or blood, you might be prescribed calming herbs, a cool compress, or even a gentle lullaby. If you were overly lethargic, excess phlegm, or black bile, you might be encouraged to engage in moderate exercise or spend more time in sunlight. The goal was to find the perfect rhythm of rest and activity to support humoral balance. It was like a medieval sleep coach, but instead of counting sheep, they were counting humors. Still can't sleep? Perhaps your humors are just too excited? We'll try a nice long walk in the morning, followed by a very bland porridge. An obscure detail, often overlooked, is the specific role of the moon and stars in humoral theory. While not a humor itself, celestial bodies were believed to influence the balance of humors. For instance, the waxing and waning of the moon was thought to affect the phlegmatic humor, making individuals more prone to certain moods during specific lunar phases. Physicians would consult astrological charts before prescribing treatments, believing that the alignment of planets could exacerbate or alleviate humoral imbalances. So, your madness wasn't just internal, it was cosmic. It was like your horoscope dictating your medical treatment. Oh, Mars is in retrograde. That explains your sudden urge to wear a bucket on your head. We'll need extra leeches for that. Exercise and rest were equally important. Moderate exercise was believed to help circulate the humors, preventing stagnation and promoting overall health. However, excessive exertion could lead to an imbalance of hot humors, while too much idleness could cause cold humors to accumulate. A physician might prescribe a gentle walk in a pleasant garden for a melancholic patient, or more vigorous activity for someone suffering from lethargy. It was about finding the perfect balance, a medieval fitness plan tailored to your humoral needs. Feeling a bit sluggish? We'll have you doing some light gardening, just don't overdo it. Or you'll end up with too much yellow bile and start yelling at the turnips. The concept of madness itself was fluid and encompassed a wide range of conditions we would now differentiate. Melancholy, mania, hysteria, and even what we might consider simple eccentricity were all viewed through the humoral lens. A person suffering from deep depression, for instance, was seen as having an excess of black bile, often leading to treatments aimed at expelling this dark, heavy humor. Conversely, someone experiencing manic episodes, with boundless energy and erratic behavior, might be diagnosed with an excess of blood or yellow bile, leading to bloodletting or purges to cool their fiery disposition. Excretion and retention, while perhaps not the most glamorous topic, were absolutely critical. Regular bowel movements and urination were seen as essential for expelling waste products and maintaining humoral balance. If you were constipated, or if your urine was discolored, it was a clear sign that humors were accumulating, potentially leading to madness. Physicians would prescribe specific diets, herbs, or even enemas to ensure that your body was properly cleansed. It was a very literal interpretation of getting things out of your system. Historians still debate whether the medieval understanding of humors, despite its scientific inaccuracies, offered a coherent and comforting framework for understanding illness in a world with limited true medical knowledge. Was it a primitive form of psychosomatic medicine, where belief in the cure itself offered some relief? Or was it simply a dangerous and often painful system that did more harm than good? There's no easy answer, as the line between placebo and genuine therapeutic effect was blurry, and the suffering endured by patients was very real. Some scholars argue that the systematic nature of humoral theory, even if flawed, provided a sense of order and predictability in a chaotic world, allowing both patient and physician to believe they understood the mysterious workings of the body. Others contend that it perpetuated harmful practices and delayed the development of more effective treatments. It's a bit like arguing about whether your great-aunt's cure-all tonic was effective because it had herbs in it, or because everyone believed it worked. An interesting, though less common, detail is the medieval belief in the therapeutic power of specific colors in one's environment or clothing. While not directly a lifestyle adjustment in the modern sense, it was a subtle environmental influence. For instance, a melancholic patient, suffering from an excess of cold, dark black bile, might be encouraged to wear bright, warm colors like red or yellow, or to spend time in rooms decorated with such hues. These colors were believed to have a warming and drying effect, counteracting the cold and dry nature of black bile and uplifting the spirits. Conversely, someone with an excess of hot, fiery yellow bile might be advised to surround themselves with cool blues and greens. It was like medieval color therapy, where your wardrobe was a prescription. Consider the case of love melancholy, a recognized form of madness in the medieval period. If you were lovesick to the point of despair, wasting away, it was attributed to an excess of black bile, often brought on by unrequited love or separation from a beloved. The treatment might involve bloodletting to cool the passions, or purgatives to expel the melancholic humor. Sometimes the cure was simply to arrange a marriage or reunite the lovers, which, surprisingly, often worked. Makes you wonder if some medieval doctors were just really good matchmakers disguised as physicians. Yes, a classic case of too much black bile, exacerbated by a lack of eligible bachelors. We'll prescribe a nice, eligible lord, and a good purge just in case. Historians still debate the true efficacy of these lifestyle interventions. While some aspects, like the importance of sleep and moderate exercise, align with modern understanding, the underlying humoral rationale was flawed. Did patients genuinely improve due to the specific humoral properties of their diet? Or was it the routine, the structure, and the belief in the treatment that provided psychological comfort and a sense of control? Some scholars argue that the holistic nature of these prescriptions, addressing multiple aspects of a patient's life, could have had a significant positive impact, even if the scientific reasoning was incorrect. Others contend that while well-intentioned, many of these dietary and lifestyle rules were arbitrary and could sometimes lead to malnutrition or unnecessary restrictions. It's like trying to figure out if your grandmother's insistence on eating all your vegetables made you healthy because of the vitamins, or because you were just too scared not to. The medieval physician, armed with his knowledge of humors, wasn't just a doctor, he was a diagnostician, a pharmacist, and sometimes a bit of a philosopher. He understood the intricate connections between the body, the mind, and the wider universe. Every symptom, every mood swing, every strange behavior could be traced back to the balance, or imbalance, of these four vital fluids. It was a holistic approach, in a way, even if the underlying science was, by modern standards, completely off the mark. They weren't just treating symptoms, they were trying to restore cosmic harmony within the individual. Consider the case of a scholar prone to deep bouts of melancholy, spending long hours hunched over books. His physician might diagnose an excess of cold, dry black bile, exacerbated by his sedentary, intellectual lifestyle. The prescription might include a diet rich in warm, moist foods like chicken broth and sweet wine, regular walks in the sunshine, and perhaps even a recommendation to engage in more sanguine activities, like lively conversation or listening to music. The goal was to counteract the drying effects of study, and to introduce more warmth and moisture into his system, both physically and emotionally. It was a very personalized lifestyle overhaul, designed to balance his inner self with his outer world. The tools of the trade were simple, yet often terrifying. Beyond the lancets and leeches, there were cupping glasses, heated glass cups placed on the skin to create a vacuum, drawing blood to the surface and, it was believed, drawing out bad humors. This left angry red welts, a visible sign that the cure was working. Imagine waking up after a cupping session, looking in a polished silver mirror and seeing a constellation of purple marks on your back. It was a badge of honor, or perhaps just a badge of having been through something quite unpleasant. The concept of regimen sanitatis, or regimen of health, was a popular genre of medical texts in the Middle Ages. These books offered advice on how to live a healthy life, covering everything from diet and exercise to bathing and sexual activity, all viewed through the lens of humoral theory. They were like the medieval equivalent of self-help books, providing detailed instructions on how to maintain humoral balance and prevent illness, including madness. You might find yourself reading a chapter on the best wines for a melancholic disposition, or the ideal time of day for a brisk walk to clear your phlegm. The very air you breathed was thought to influence your humors. Bad air, or miasma, was believed to contribute to imbalances, especially those leading to disease and mental distress. This led to practices like burning aromatic herbs to purify the air, or avoiding certain unhealthy locations. It was a bit like a medieval air freshener, but with much higher stakes for your health. Is that the scent of plague or just your neighbor's cooking? Either way, let's get some rosemary burning. Even the act of bathing was considered a lifestyle intervention with humoral implications. Warm baths were believed to relax the body and open the pores, allowing for the release of excess humors or toxins. Cold baths, on the other hand, were thought to constrict the body and retain heat. A physician might prescribe a specific type of bath, at a particular temperature, for a certain duration, all to influence your internal balance. It was like a medieval hydrotherapy session, but with a very specific humoral goal. Feeling a bit too hot-headed? We'll put you in a nice, cool bath. Just don't stay in too long, or you'll get too phlegmatic and start talking to the bubbles. This deep-seated belief in humoral theory meant that madness wasn't seen as a separate entity, a disease of the brain in isolation, but rather a systemic imbalance affecting the entire person. It wasn't just your mind that was sick. Your blood, your phlegm, your bile, they were all out of whack. This holistic view, while misguided in its specifics, did mean that treatment often involved a multi-pronged approach, addressing diet, environment, and physical interventions, all aimed at restoring the body's natural harmony. It was a complex, intricate dance. And you, the patient, were the stage. The medieval understanding of passions of the mind as a non-natural was particularly fascinating in the context of madness. Strong emotions like anger, fear, joy, and sorrow were believed to directly impact the humors. Excessive anger could heat the yellow bile, leading to choleric madness. Prolonged sorrow could increase black bile, causing melancholy. Therefore, managing one's emotional life, cultivating serenity, and avoiding extreme passions were crucial aspects of maintaining mental health. This often involved spiritual guidance, philosophical contemplation, and even social interventions to resolve conflicts or alleviate distress. It was an early form of emotional regulation, but regulated by humoral theory. You are still in this world where the harmonious balance of your body's four humors is the key to everything, from physical health to mental sanity. But now, imagine that after a thorough examination of your humors, that same kindly, bearded physician decides that bleeding or purging isn't the only solution. Instead, he turns to a heavy wooden cabinet, exuding the scent of earth, dried leaves, and something vaguely peculiar. This is the realm of herbs and concoctions, where the power of nature is harnessed to combat humoral imbalances and soothe troubled minds. The environment you lived in, beyond just the air, also played a role. The orientation of your house, the type of materials used in its construction, and even the presence of certain plants or animals were all considered. A house facing south might be too hot for someone with an excess of yellow bile, while a damp, north-facing dwelling could exacerbate phlegmatic conditions. It was a medieval version of feng shui, but instead of good luck, it was about good humors. Think of monastic gardens, wild fields, and dense forests as the vast pharmacies of the Middle Ages. Every plant, every flower, every root was believed to possess specific qualities, able to warm or cool, moisten or dry, and thus capable of restoring a lost humoral balance. You might find yourself prescribed a decoction of jasmine to calm an agitated mind, or a strong tea made from nettles to cleanse your system. It was a very organic approach, if you will, but one built upon a system of beliefs as intricate as deciphering an ancient treasure map. Ultimately, the medieval approach to diet and lifestyle for treating madness was a testament to their belief in the interconnectedness of all things. Your food, your sleep, your exercise, your emotions, and your environment were not separate entities, but parts of a grand, intricate system. By carefully managing these external factors, physicians sought to restore the internal harmony of your humors, bringing peace to your troubled mind. It was a constant, daily effort, a mindful existence where every choice had a potential impact on your sanity. One of the most potent, and indeed dangerous, herbs you might encounter was opium. Yes, opium. From the poppy plant, medieval physicians extracted a powerful liquid capable of dulling pain, inducing sleep, and, most importantly, quieting agitated minds. If you were experiencing a manic episode with racing thoughts and erratic behavior, a dose of opium might be prescribed to slow everything down, bringing you to a state of calm, albeit temporary. It was like trying to turn off an alarm clock by throwing it out the window. Possibly effective, but with complicated side effects. The use of opium was a double-edged sword. It could offer relief, but also lead to dependence or, an overdose, death. Physicians had to walk a fine line between soothing and harming. And as you drift deeper into the night, imagine the medieval person carefully choosing their meal, timing their walk, and considering the very air they breathe, all in the pursuit of a balanced mind. It's a reminder that even in an age of limited scientific understanding, the human desire for health and well-being led to complex, often surprising, systems of care that shaped every aspect of daily life. Another plant frequently used for mental ailments was hellebore, particularly black hellebore. This isn't the kind of plant you'd want to add to your salad. Black hellebore was a powerful purgative, believed to cleanse the body of excess black bile, the primary culprit for melancholy. Imagine drinking a bitter, unpleasant concoction and then undergoing an intensely purifying experience. It was believed that expelling this black bile would rid you of your sorrow and restore your sanity. White hellebore was also used, but more often as an emetic. Basically, if you were mentally unwell, you were probably in for a bad day in the privy. Oh, feeling a bit down. We will sort that out with a bit of hellebore. Don't worry, it'll only make you wish you'd never been born. You've carefully considered your medieval diet, timed your walks, and even thought about the color of your tunic, all in the pursuit of humoral balance. But what happens when these daily adjustments, the herbs, the purges, the prayers, and even the alignment of the stars, aren't enough? What if your madness persists, defying every known remedy and leaving you isolated from your community? In such cases, the medieval world, slowly but surely, began to grapple with the idea of dedicated spaces for those whose minds had truly fractured. This is where we witness the nascent beginnings of early institutions. The very first, often rudimentary, care facilities for the mentally ill. Mugwort, a common herbaceous plant, also played a significant role. It was used to treat nervous disorders, epilepsy, and particularly women's ailments believed to be caused by a wandering womb. It was thought that mugwort could help stabilize the nervous system and calm the mind. You might be instructed to wear a sachet of dried mugwort around your neck, or drink a mugwort tea before bed. It was like a gentle medieval sedative, but with a dash of folk magic thrown in. For much of the early medieval period, care for the mentally ill primarily fell to families, local communities, or the church. If you were afflicted, your loved ones might try to manage you at home, perhaps with the help of a local wise woman or a parish priest. If your behavior became too disruptive or dangerous, you might be confined, perhaps in a locked room, or even chained to prevent harm to yourself or others. It was a desperate measure, born of fear and a lack of understanding, rather than any formal system of care. Imagine being locked away in your own home, not because you were a criminal, but because your mind had become a stranger to itself. It's like being grounded for life, but the reason is your own brain. Your valerian, with its distinctive scent, some say like dirty socks, was another widely used herb for insomnia and anxiety. If you couldn't sleep because your mind was racing, a decoction of valerian root might be prescribed to help you drift off. It's one of the few herbs that modern science has actually confirmed to have mild sedative properties. So, at least some of their treatments had a basis in reality. even if they didn't know why. However, as towns and cities grew, and as society became more complex, the informal network of family and community care began to strain. There was a growing need for more structured solutions, especially for those who had no family, or whose families could no longer cope. This led to the gradual emergence of institutions that, while far from modern hospitals, represented a significant, albeit often grim, step towards organized care for the mentally ill. Borage, with its vibrant blue flowers, was believed to dispel sadness and bring joy. If you were steeped in melancholy, a decoction of borage flowers might be recommended. It was thought to uplift the spirits and lighten the heart. It was like a natural antidepressant, but instead of a tiny pill, you'd be drinking a cup of something that tasted vaguely like cucumber. The common historical fact here is that many of the earliest institutions that housed the mentally ill were not purpose-built as asylums in the modern sense. Instead, they were often extensions of existing charitable or religious foundations, such as monasteries, hospices, or general hospitals that cared for the sick, the poor, and the infirm. These places, driven by Christian charity, would admit individuals suffering from various ailments, including those exhibiting signs of madness. The primary goal was often spiritual salvation and basic physical sustenance, rather than therapeutic intervention for mental illness specifically. Hypericum, or St. John's wort, though more widely known in later periods, also had some early applications in treating conditions related to demonic possession or melancholy. It was believed to have the power to ward off evil spirits and bring clarity to the mind. It's an example of how the line between medicine and spiritual belief was often blurred in the Middle Ages. Imagine a large, sprawling complex, perhaps a monastery with thick stone walls and quiet courtyards. Within its confines, alongside the physically ill and the destitute, you might find individuals exhibiting signs of madness. They might be housed in separate cells or wards, often for their own safety and the safety of others. The conditions varied wildly. Some monastic infirmaries might offer a degree of quiet contemplation and basic care, while others, particularly those overwhelmed by numbers, could be chaotic and neglectful. The emphasis was often on containment and prayer, rather than any attempt at psychological healing. It's like a medieval mixed-use development, but instead of shops and apartments, it's sick people and prayers. The preparation of these remedies was no simple process. It often involved physicians, wise women in villages, or monks and nuns in monasteries. Herbs would be gathered at specific times of the year, sometimes during certain moon phases, or with specific prayers and rituals, as it was believed this would enhance their potency. They would then be crushed, boiled, steeped, or mixed to create decoctions, infusions, poultices, salves, or powders. You might find yourself drinking a steaming, pungent brew, or having a poultice of crushed herbs placed on your forehead to draw out bad humors. One of the earliest and most famous examples of a dedicated institution, though it evolved over centuries, was St. Mary Bethlehem Hospital in London, famously known as Bedlam. While its later reputation became synonymous with chaos and cruelty, its origins in the 13th century were as a priory that provided care for the poor and sick. By the late 14th century, it began to specifically admit and care for lunatics. This shift marked a significant, albeit slow, recognition that madness required a distinct form of institutionalized care. Imagine being one of the first patients admitted, perhaps finding a strange comfort in the shared experience of fractured minds, or perhaps just a deeper sense of despair. Each herb was assigned a specific humoral quality. A hot and dry herb like fennel might be used to counteract an excess of cold and moist phlegm. A cold and moist herb like lettuce might be given to cool down hot and dry yellow bile. The selection of herbs was a delicate art, requiring a deep understanding of both the plants and the humoral system. It was like you were trying to balance a giant set of scales, with an herb and a humor on each side. The care provided in these early institutions was rudimentary at best. There were no psychiatrists, no psychologists, and certainly no modern therapies. The treatments applied would be those we've already discussed: bloodletting, purges, herbal remedies, and spiritual interventions like prayer and exorcism. The daily routine would likely involve communal prayers, simple meals, and perhaps some light work if the patient was capable. For those who were violent or unmanageable, physical restraints chains, manacles, or straitjackets made of canvas were commonly used. It was a stark reality, where safety and order often trumped individual liberty or comfort. Oh, you're feeling a bit restless. We'll just put you in this lovely custom-fitted canvas jacket. It's very fashionable and also keeps you from biting the other patients. A common historical fact is the vital role of monasteries in preserving and advancing herbal medical knowledge. Monks and nuns often maintained extensive herb gardens where they cultivated, studied, and documented medicinal plants. They were the custodians of ancient medical texts and often the primary providers of healthcare for local communities. Monasteries were centers of learning, where medical manuscripts were copied and studied, ensuring that herbal knowledge was passed down through generations. The concept of moral treatment, which emphasized kindness, routine, and meaningful activity, was centuries away. In the medieval institution, the primary objective for those deemed incurably mad was often simply to keep them contained and prevent them from harming themselves or others. This often led to conditions that, by modern standards, would be considered inhumane. Overcrowding, poor sanitation, and a lack of trained staff were common problems. The air might be thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and human waste, and the cries of the afflicted could echo through the stone corridors. However, the efficacy of these treatments is a complex question. Some herbs, like opium and valerian, did indeed have pharmacological effects, but many others did not, or they worked only due to the placebo effect. Furthermore, the lack of standardized dosages meant that a remedy could be too weak to have an effect, or so strong as to be toxic. You might be getting a tiny, calming dose of opium, or a massive, dangerously poisonous dose of hellebore. It was like playing a lottery with your health, but the biggest prize was not dying. An interesting, though less common, detail is the existence of fool houses or idiot houses in some medieval towns. Distinct from general hospitals or monastic infirmaries, these were smaller, more localized facilities, often funded by local guilds or wealthy patrons, specifically for the care of individuals with severe intellectual disabilities or chronic, debilitating mental conditions. Unlike the more general lunatic wards, these places often focused on providing lifelong custodial care rather than attempting a cure. They represented a very early, albeit limited, form of specialized care, recognizing that some forms of mental incapacitation were permanent and required ongoing support. It's like a medieval specialized boarding school, but for people who couldn't quite manage daily life. A unique or little-known detail is the belief that certain herbs had to be gathered at specific times of day or year, or even under certain constellations, to achieve their full potency. For instance, nettles might be thought to be most powerful if harvested on a full moon night, or mugwort had to be cut in the early morning before the sun rose. Sometimes, specific prayers or incantations would be recited during the gathering or preparation to activate the plant's energies. This shows the blurred line between medicine, magic, and folk belief in the Middle Ages. It wasn't just about the chemistry of the plant, it was about cosmic energy and divine intervention. Historians still debate whether the emergence of these early institutions was primarily an act of charity and compassion, reflecting a genuine desire to care for the vulnerable, or if it was more a pragmatic response to social pressures, a way to remove disruptive or burdensome individuals from public view. Some scholars argue that the charitable impulse, rooted in Christian teachings, was a powerful driving force, leading to the creation of spaces where the marginalized could find refuge. Others contend that as urban populations grew, the mentally ill became more visible and disruptive, necessitating their confinement for the sake of public order and safety. It's like trying to figure out if your neighbor helped you move because they genuinely wanted to, or because they just wanted you out of their hair. Historians still debate whether the widespread use of herbal remedies in the Middle Ages was an early form of empirical medicine, where practitioners learned the efficacy of certain plants through trial and error, or if it was largely a continuation of superstitious traditions and a lack of scientific understanding. Did they stumble upon effective treatments, or was it simply an elaborate system of belief that sometimes coincidentally yielded results? The answer likely lies somewhere in the middle, with some treatments having a basis in reality, while many others relied entirely on faith and hope. Consider the case of a merchant's son, once bright and promising, who succumbs to a profound melancholic madness, withdrawing completely from the world. His family, unable to care for him at home, might seek admission for him to a local hospital or a monastic infirmary that accepts such cases. He would likely be placed in a quiet cell, perhaps given a simple diet, and subjected to prayers and occasional purges. The hope would be that the structured environment and spiritual atmosphere might bring him peace, or perhaps even a miraculous recovery. Recall the story of a woman afflicted with hysteria, a condition often attributed to a wandering womb or severe humoral imbalance. She might be prescribed a decoction of mugwort, a plant believed to calm the nerves and keep the womb in its proper place. At the same time, she might also be instructed to inhale the fumes from burning certain other herbs to purify the surrounding air and ward off ill spirits. It was a combination of botanical medicine and a little bit of ghost busting. The staff in these early institutions were rarely trained medical professionals in the modern sense. They might be monks, nuns, or lay attendants, whose primary qualifications were often their religious vows and a willingness to perform basic care. Their understanding of mental illness would be rooted in humoral theory and spiritual belief, and their methods would reflect these understandings. There was no formal psychiatric nursing or mental health aid profession. It was a learning-on-the-job kind of situation with very high stakes for the patients. Beyond ingestion, herbs were also used in poultices and salves. If you suffered from a severe headache or felt your mind was overheated, a poultice of crushed mint leaves or lavender might be placed on your forehead or temples. Their scent not only soothed the senses, but was also believed to cool or warm the internal humors. It was like a medieval spa treatment, but with a medicinal rather than purely relaxing purpose. The legal and social status of the mentally ill in the medieval period also played a role in the development of these institutions. Individuals deemed lunatics often lost their legal rights, including the right to manage their property or make decisions for themselves. Guardians or committees might be appointed to oversee their affairs. This legal framework, while ostensibly protective, also facilitated their confinement in institutions, as their lack of legal standing made it easier to remove them from society. It was a medieval version of conservatorship, but without the pop stars. The lack of modern anatomical and physiological knowledge meant that medieval physicians often relied on observation and anecdotal evidence. If an herb seemed to work for one patient, it would be recorded and passed down. This led to a vast compendium of herbal knowledge, but it also meant that errors or misunderstandings could be perpetuated from one generation to the next. It was like a giant recipe book, but without the handy notes about if you add too much of this, you die. The distinction between madness and idiocy was also important. Idiots were generally understood to be those born with severe intellectual disabilities, considered to be permanently incapacitated. Lunatics, on the other hand, were those who had experienced a loss of reason, often with periods of lucidity, and whose condition was sometimes believed to be curable. This distinction influenced where individuals were placed and what kind of care they received, with idiots often receiving more custodial long-term care, while lunatics might be subjected to more active, albeit crude, treatments aimed at restoring their reason. Ultimately, the herbal treatment of madness in the Middle Ages was a complex blend of science, superstition, and a limited understanding of the human body. While many of the treatments might make us wince today, they were sincere attempts by practitioners to help those suffering in a world where the understanding of illness was still in its infancy. And as you close your eyes, imagine the scent of these ancient herbs, carrying both the hope and the uncertainty of a bygone era. The role of charity and philanthropy cannot be overstated in the establishment of these early institutions. Wealthy individuals, often driven by religious devotion, would donate land, money, or resources to fund hospitals and hospices. These acts of charity were seen as a path to salvation and a demonstration of piety. While the care provided might seem harsh to us, for the medieval donor, it was an act of profound generosity and a commitment to Christian values. It was a medieval version of crowdfunding, but the currency was your soul. You've explored the delicate balance of humors and delved into the earthy realm of herbal remedies. Now, as the soft hum of the fan continues, let's prepare ourselves for a journey into a more hands-on approach to medieval medicine. Imagine the physician, perhaps after finding that your humors are still stubbornly out of whack, or that the strongest hellebore just isn't doing the trick, turning to a collection of gleaming and frankly terrifying instruments. This is where the line between healing and outright horror begins to blur, as we explore the drastic, often perilous, physical procedures aimed at curing madness. Despite their limitations, these early institutions represented a nascent, if imperfect, attempt to address the needs of the mentally ill outside the family unit. They were the very first seeds of what would eventually become a more formalized system of mental health care, albeit one that would take many centuries to evolve and reform. They provided a space, however confining, where individuals who could no longer function in society could be housed, fed, and offered some form of spiritual comfort. In the medieval mind, if an imbalance was severe enough, or if the humors were somehow trapped or corrupted within the body, a more direct intervention was deemed necessary. This often meant cutting, drilling, or otherwise physically manipulating the body to release the offending substances or to alleviate pressure. It was a time before antiseptics, before anesthesia as we know it, and certainly before any real understanding of germ theory. So, when we talk about medieval surgery, picture a scene that might make you instinctively cross your legs and wince. And as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet, echoing halls of these ancient institutions, the murmurs of prayer, the clinking of chains, and the faint, distant cries. It's a stark reminder of humanity's enduring struggle to understand and care for the troubled mind. A journey that began in the flickering candlelight of the Middle Ages, laying the groundwork, however flawed, for the complex systems of care we have today. One of the most famous and perhaps most chilling surgical procedures was trepanation, or trepanning. This involved drilling a hole or scraping away a section of the skull. Why, you ask? The belief was that madness, particularly conditions involving seizures, severe headaches, or what they might interpret as demonic possession, could be caused by evil spirits trapped within the head, or by an excess of bad humors pressing on the brain. By creating an opening in the skull, these malevolent forces or noxious fluids could be released, thereby restoring the patient's sanity. It sounds less like surgery and more like a very aggressive form of pest control, doesn't it? Oh, you're hearing voices. We'll just open a little window in your head and let them out. You've seen the early, often grim attempts at institutional care for the mentally ill, a testament to a society grappling with profound suffering. Now, let's return to the more universal and perhaps even more pervasive physical therapies that were applied not just to those deemed mad, but to almost everyone in the medieval world for a vast array of ailments. Imagine a time when a warm soak and a good bleed were considered the go-to solutions for everything from a fever to a fit of melancholy. This is where we investigate the pervasive, often brutal, physical therapies applied universally to the bath and bloodletting. Imagine yourself lying on a rough wooden table, perhaps in a dimly lit room. The physician, or more likely, a barber surgeon, because, yes, the same person who cut your hair might also cut into your skull, approaches with a set of tools. There's the trepan, a hand-cranked drill with a circular saw, or perhaps a simple chisel and mallet. The process would be agonizingly painful, and the risk of infection, brain damage, or death was astronomically high. Yet archaeological evidence from medieval burial sites shows that some individuals actually survived trepanation, with new bone growth around the edges of the holes. It suggests a remarkable, if terrifying, resilience of the human body. Or perhaps a very lucky day for the patient. We've touched upon bloodletting before when discussing humoral imbalances, but its significance cannot be overstated. It was not merely a treatment for specific conditions of madness. It was a fundamental pillar of medieval medicine, a prophylactic measure, and a universal remedy. If you felt unwell, if you had a headache, if you were feeling sluggish, or indeed if you were exhibiting signs of madness, the first thought of many a physician would be to open a vein and let some blood flow. The belief was simple: an excess of blood, or plethora, was a common cause of illness, and removing it would restore balance. It's like a medieval oil change for your body. But instead of dirty oil, it's just blood. The common historical fact here is that trepanation is one of the oldest known surgical procedures, dating back thousands of years before the medieval period. It was practiced by ancient civilizations across the globe, suggesting a universal, albeit primitive, understanding that the head was connected to mental states. The medieval period simply continued this ancient tradition, adapting it to their humoral and spiritual beliefs. It wasn't a new invention, but a persistent, desperate measure. Imagine yourself in a barber surgeon's shop, the air thick with the smell of iron and something vaguely medicinal. You might be seated on a simple stool, your arm extended, while the barber surgeon, perhaps with a surprisingly steady hand, prepares his tools. There's the lancet, a small, sharp blade, or perhaps a fleam, a wider, pointed instrument used for larger veins. The chosen vein would be nicked, and the blood would flow into a basin, often marked with measurements. The amount of blood removed could vary from a small cupful to a significant quantity, depending on the patient's condition and the physician's judgment. The sight of your own blood, flowing freely, was meant to be both a physical and psychological release, a visible sign that the bad humors were leaving your body. Beyond the head, other parts of the body were also subjected to surgical intervention. Cauterization, the application of hot irons to the skin, was used to burn out disease or to create an opening for humors to escape. If a physician believed that a specific part of the body was accumulating bad humors, leading to madness, they might apply a heated iron to that area. The pain would be excruciating, and the resulting wound would be prone to infection. It was like a medieval reset button, but instead of restarting your computer, you were just getting a really bad burn. The common historical fact here is the astonishing ubiquity of bloodletting across all social classes and for virtually every ailment in the medieval period. It wasn't just for the very sick or the mad. It was a routine part of maintaining health, much like a yearly checkup today. People would undergo periodic bloodletting as a preventative measure, believing it cleansed the system and warded off disease. It was so common that specialized bloodletting calendars existed, indicating the most auspicious days and times for the procedure based on astrological alignments and lunar phases. Another less invasive, but still physically impactful, procedure was scarification. This involved making small cuts or scratches on the skin, often in specific patterns or locations, to allow for the release of bad blood or other humors. It was a milder form of bloodletting, but still carried the risk of infection and scarring. You might end up looking like you'd had a very unfortunate encounter with a cat. But hey, at least your humors were balanced. Right? Beyond the direct opening of veins. Cupping was another popular method for bloodletting, or at least for drawing blood to the surface. Imagine heated glass cups, often with a small amount of flammable material briefly ignited inside to create a vacuum, being quickly placed on your skin. As the air inside cooled, it would create suction, pulling the skin and underlying tissues upwards, causing blood vessels to dilate and blood to rush to the surface. This could be dry cupping, where no blood was actually drawn, but the redness and bruising were believed to indicate the movement of humors. Or it could be wet cupping, where small incisions were made in the skin before the cup was applied, allowing blood to be drawn out. It was like a medieval hickey, but with a medical purpose. Oh, those marks, just my doctor giving me a little humoral adjustment. Very fashionable. The use of setons and issues was also common. A seton involved passing a thread or strip of material like horsehair or linen through a fold of skin, creating a permanent draining wound. An issue was a similar concept, involving the insertion of a pea or bead under the skin to create a persistent ulcer. Both were designed to provide a continuous outlet for noxious humors to drain from the body. The logic was that a constant discharge of pus and fluid would prevent the buildup of harmful substances that could lead to madness. Imagine having a perpetually weeping wound on your arm, all in the name of mental health. It sounds like a medieval version of a leaky faucet, but the faucet is you. Then there were leeches. These slimy, segmented creatures were nature's own bloodletters. If a specific area of your body was believed to be inflamed or congested with bad humors, a physician might apply a handful of medicinal leeches. They would attach themselves to your skin and slowly engorge themselves with blood, dropping off once full. The thought of it might make your skin crawl. But for medieval people, it was a common and often preferred method, as it was considered less invasive than a lancet cut and could be applied to delicate areas. It's like having a tiny, living, blood-sucking vacuum cleaner. An interesting, though less common, detail is the practice of surgical removal of stones of madness. This was based on the belief, particularly prevalent in some folk traditions, that madness was caused by small stones or foreign bodies lodged in the brain. Quacks and itinerant surgeons, often operating outside the established medical institutions, would claim to extract these stones through a small incision in the scalp. Of course, the stones were often cleverly concealed pebbles or pieces of bone that the surgeon would produce from their hand, having never actually removed anything from the patient's head. It was a gruesome magic trick, preying on the desperation of the afflicted and their families. While not widely endorsed by learned physicians, the existence of such practices highlights the desperate search for cures and the vulnerability of the mentally ill in an age of limited understanding. Now, let's turn to the bath. While perhaps less dramatic than bloodletting, bathing was also a significant therapeutic practice. Deeply intertwined with humoral theory, water, being cold and moist, was believed to have specific effects on the body's humors. Warm baths were thought to relax the body, open the pores, and facilitate the expulsion of toxins and excess humors through sweating. Cold baths, on the other hand, were believed to constrict the body, invigorate the spirits, and perhaps even shock the system into balance. Historians still debate the true motivations behind some of these extreme surgical interventions. Were they purely based on a flawed understanding of anatomy and humoral theory? Or was there an element of ritual and spectacle involved, designed to impress and reassure the patient and their family that something drastic was being done? Some scholars argue that the very act of such a dramatic procedure, regardless of its physiological effect, could have had a powerful psychological impact, perhaps even a placebo effect, on those who believed in its efficacy. Others contend that they were simply barbaric and ineffective, causing immense suffering with little to no benefit. It's like trying to figure out if your uncle's bizarre home remedy for hiccups worked because of the science, or because you were just so shocked by it that you forgot about the hiccups. Imagine yourself in a public bathhouse, a common feature in many medieval towns, especially in the earlier periods. These were not just places for hygiene, they were social hubs, places for relaxation, and indeed, for medical treatment. You might be prescribed a specific type of bath, a warm herbal bath to soothe agitated nerves, or a cold plunge to invigorate a melancholic disposition. The water might be infused with specific herbs, salts, or even minerals, chosen for their humoral properties. It was like a medieval spa day, but instead of cucumber slices, you might have leeches. Consider the case of a patient suffering from severe melancholy, perhaps refusing to eat or speak, and exhibiting extreme lethargy. A physician might conclude that their black bile was so stagnant and abundant that it needed a direct physical outlet. They might propose a seton in the arm or leg, or even a cauterization mark on the back of the neck, to draw out the putrid humors. The hope was that by creating a persistent drain, the body would cleanse itself, and the mind would clear. It was a testament to the belief that the physical and mental were inextricably linked, and that a problem of the mind could be solved with a knife and a hot iron. For those suffering from madness, bathing was often seen as a way to cleanse both the body and the mind. A warm, prolonged bath could be prescribed to calm a manic patient, while a cold bath, or even a sudden dousing with cold water, was sometimes used to shock a melancholic or catatonic individual back to awareness. The idea was to physically alter the body's temperature and moisture levels to influence the humors. It was a very direct and sometimes quite brutal form of hydrotherapy. The environment in which these surgeries took place was far from sterile. Imagine the surgeon's hands, perhaps wiped on a not-so-clean apron, the instruments unsterilized, and the air filled with dust and the general grime of medieval life. Post-operative infection was a rampant killer, often more deadly than the original ailment. A simple cut could lead to gangrene, blood poisoning, and a slow, agonizing death. The courage, or perhaps sheer desperation, of those who underwent such procedures is almost unfathomable to us today. An interesting, though less common, detail is the use of fever baths or sweating baths, specifically for mental ailments. These were intensely hot baths, sometimes combined with steam or hot air, designed to induce profuse sweating. The belief was that the sweat would carry away noxious humors and impurities from the body, thereby clearing the mind. Patients might be wrapped in blankets after the bath to prolong the sweating. While potentially dehydrating and dangerous, it was seen as a powerful way to cleanse the internal system. It's like a medieval sauna, but the goal is to sweat out your madness, not just relax. Even less dramatic procedures, like the extraction of teeth, were sometimes linked to the treatment of madness. If a tooth was believed to be rotten or infected, it was thought to harbor bad humors that could spread to the brain and cause mental disturbance. A painful extraction, without any form of effective pain relief, would be the cure. It's a reminder that medieval medicine often treated the body as a series of interconnected, yet often mysterious vessels and conduits, where a problem in one area could easily spill over into another. Historians still debate the actual therapeutic benefits of these widespread physical therapies. While some aspects, like the relaxing effect of a warm bath or the temporary relief from pressure a bloodletting might offer, could have had a palliative effect, the underlying humoral rationale was scientifically unsound. Did patients genuinely improve due to the specific humoral properties of the treatments? Or was it the ritual, the belief, and the physical sensation that provided a sense of intervention and hope? Some scholars argue that these practices, while often painful and risky, offered a tangible response to illness in an age of limited understanding, providing psychological comfort and a sense of agency. Others contend that they were largely ineffective and often caused more harm than good, contributing to weakness, infection, and even death. It's like trying to decide if your grandfather's cure for cold whiskey and a hot bath worked because of the alcohol, or because you just felt too warm and fuzzy to care about the cold anymore. The concept of sympathetic magic also played a subtle role in some surgical approaches. For example, if a patient was believed to be possessed by a demon, and the demon was thought to reside in a specific limb, a small incision or scarification on that limb might be performed to release the demon. While not strictly surgical in the modern sense, these interventions were physical acts with a perceived therapeutic goal, blending medical practice with spiritual belief. It's like trying to get a stubborn stain out of a shirt, but the stain is an evil spirit. Consider the case of a person suffering from what we might now diagnose as severe anxiety or panic attacks, manifesting as agitation and restlessness. A medieval physician might attribute this to an excess of hot, dry, yellow bile. The prescription would likely involve a combination of bloodletting to cool the system, followed by a series of warm, calming baths infused with herbs like chamomile or lavender. The goal was to physically reduce the heat and dryness in the body, thereby calming the mind. It was a very physical approach to a mental state, treating the body as the direct pathway to the mind. The risks associated with these procedures were not unknown to medieval people. Accounts of botched surgeries and deaths were certainly circulated, yet in a world without effective pharmacological treatments for severe mental illness, and with a strong belief in the humoral theory, these drastic measures were often seen as the only hope. The alternative, for many, was a life of unremitting suffering, social ostracization, or confinement. For some, the gamble was worth the potential, however slim, for a return to sanity. The tools of bloodletting were often specialized and sometimes quite ornate. Beyond lancets, there were scarificators, small boxes with multiple spring-loaded blades that would snap out and create a series of shallow cuts, often used before wet cupping. These instruments, passed down through generations, were a testament to the enduring nature of these practices. Imagine the glint of the metal, the precision of the cuts, a ritual of healing that was both intimate and unsettling. It's easy for us, with our modern medical advancements, to look back at these practices with a sense of horror and disbelief. But it's crucial to remember the context. These were not acts of malice, but desperate attempts to alleviate suffering based on the best available knowledge of the time. The physicians and barber surgeons, for all their crude methods, were trying to heal, to restore balance, and to bring peace to troubled minds. They were working with the tools and understanding they had, however limited. The social aspect of bathing, particularly in public bathhouses, also played a role in the care of the mentally ill. While not a specific therapy for madness, the communal environment could offer a degree of social interaction and a break from isolation for those whose conditions allowed it. It was a place where people from all walks of life mingled, and perhaps, for a brief time, the afflicted could feel a part of the wider community, even if their underlying condition remained. It was a medieval community center, but with more naked people and less Wi-Fi. And as you drift deeper into the night, consider the sheer bravery, or perhaps the sheer terror, of a medieval patient facing the surgeon's knife. The clink of metal, the smell of blood, the searing pain, all in the name of restoring a balance that was understood, yet so profoundly misunderstood. It's a stark reminder of how far we've come, and how much we still have to learn about the complexities of the human mind and body. The practice of purging by sweat, often induced by vigorous exercise or being wrapped in heavy blankets after a warm bath, was also linked to the idea of expelling bad humors. If a patient was deemed to have too much cold, moist phlegm, they might be encouraged to engage in activities that made them sweat profusely, or to undergo treatments designed to induce sweating. The visible expulsion of fluid was seen as a clear sign that the body was cleansing itself. You've winced at the thought of medieval surgery and perhaps even felt a phantom ache from the imagined trepanation. But now, let's shift our focus from the physical body to something far more ethereal, yet equally powerful in the medieval mind of the soul. Imagine yourself in a world where the line between illness and sin, between a medical condition and a spiritual affliction, was often indistinguishable. Here, madness wasn't always a humoral imbalance or a trapped spirit. It could be a test of faith, a punishment from God, or, most terrifyingly, the insidious work of demonic forces. This is where we delve into the profound role of faith, exorcism, and divine intervention in the medieval treatment of madness. The medieval understanding of hygiene was rudimentary by modern standards. But the act of bathing, even if infrequent for some, was recognized for its cleansing properties. For those with skin conditions or external manifestations of internal imbalances like boils or rashes, bathing was seen as a way to clean the surface and prevent further corruption of the humors. While not directly treating madness, a cleaner body was believed to contribute to overall humoral balance. In this era, the church was not just a spiritual guide, it was a central pillar of society, influencing every aspect of life, including medicine. If a physician's remedies failed, or if the symptoms of madness seemed to defy earthly explanation, perhaps you were speaking in tongues, exhibiting unnatural strength, or cursing sacred objects, then the diagnosis might shift from the physical to the spiritual. You might find yourself brought before a priest, a bishop, or even a specialized exorcist. Their faces grim with the weight of your perceived affliction. The air would be heavy with incense, the murmur of Latin prayers, and the chilling sense that something unseen was at play. The role of the barber surgeon in these physical therapies cannot be overstated. Unlike the university-trained physicians, who often focused on diagnosis and prescribing internal remedies, the barber surgeons were the ones who wielded the lancets, applied the leeches, and performed the cupping. They were the practical, hands-on practitioners, often coming from a lower social standing, but indispensable for the physical interventions. It was a division of labor, where the physician thought and the barber surgeon bled. The belief in demonic possession was a pervasive and deeply held conviction. It wasn't just a fringe idea, it was a widely accepted explanation for behaviors that were otherwise inexplicable. If you were exhibiting violent outbursts, profound changes in personality, or uttering blasphemies, it was often assumed that an evil spirit had taken root within you, twisting your mind and corrupting your soul. This wasn't merely a metaphor, it was considered a literal invasion. It's like a medieval IT support call, but instead of rebooting your computer, they're trying to reboot your soul. Have you tried casting out the demon and then turning it off and on again? Ultimately, the bath and bloodletting were two sides of the same coin in medieval physical therapy for madness. Both aimed to restore humoral balance by directly manipulating the body's fluids and temperature. While their scientific basis was flawed, they were deeply ingrained practices, reflecting a profound belief in the body's ability to heal itself if given the right impetus. They were often painful, sometimes dangerous, but in a world without modern pharmaceuticals or psychological therapies, they were the most direct and widely available tools in the physician's arsenal for combating the mysterious afflictions of the mind. The primary method for combating demonic possession was, of course, exorcism. This was a formal ritual, often lengthy and physically demanding, performed by a priest or a designated exorcist. Imagine the scene: you, perhaps restrained, surrounded by clergy chanting prayers, sprinkling holy water, and holding up crucifixes and relics. The exorcist might demand the demon's name, command it to leave, and invoke the power of God and the saints to drive it out. The process could involve fasting, prolonged prayer, and sometimes physical restraint or even mild forms of corporal punishment, all aimed at making the body an inhospitable vessel for the unwelcome entity. It was a spiritual wrestling match, with your soul as the prize, and as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the warmth of the bath, the prick of the lancet, the strange sensation of the leeches. It's a vivid reminder of a time when the body was seen as a fluid, dynamic system, constantly in need of adjustment, and where the path to a clear mind often involved a very physical, and sometimes very bloody journey. The common historical fact here is the widespread belief in demonic possession and the practice of exorcism throughout the medieval period. While modern medicine views these behaviors through the lens of mental illness, for medieval people, it was a very real and terrifying possibility. The Church provided a framework for understanding and addressing such afflictions, offering a structured response to what seemed like supernatural threats. It wasn't just a last resort. For many, it was the first and most logical explanation for severe mental distress. You've endured the imagined lancet, perhaps felt the phantom heat of a cupping glass, and considered the stark reality of medieval institutions. But now, let's take a breath and allow ourselves to drift into a softer, more harmonious corner of medieval healing. Imagine a world where the cure for a troubled mind wasn't always a painful physical intervention or a stern spiritual decree, but rather the soothing embrace of melody, the calming focus of creation, or the quiet contemplation of beauty. This is where we explore the surprisingly gentle and creative approaches to mental solace music and art therapy. Beyond overt possession, madness could also be attributed to divine punishment for sin. If you had committed a grave transgression, or if your family had, your suffering might be interpreted as God's wrath, a trial sent to test your faith or to prompt repentance. In such cases, the treatment wasn't about expelling a demon, but about seeking forgiveness and divine grace. This might involve pilgrimages to holy sites, prolonged periods of prayer and fasting, acts of charity, or even self-flagellation as a form of penance. The idea was that by purifying your soul and demonstrating your devotion, God might lift the affliction. It's like a medieval spiritual detox, but instead of kale smoothies, you're getting a lot of kneeling and self-reflection. Feeling guilty. Maybe that's why you're seeing invisible dragons. Try a pilgrimage to Canterbury. The fresh air might help, and so might divine forgiveness. In an age often characterized by harsh realities, there existed a profound understanding, inherited from classical antiquity, that the human soul was deeply connected to harmony and proportion. Just as the cosmos had its music of the spheres, so too did the individual possess an inner rhythm that, when disturbed, could lead to discord and madness. Physicians and philosophers believed that by exposing the troubled mind to harmonious sounds and engaging it in creative pursuits, this inner balance could be restored. It's like a medieval mood playlist, but instead of Spotify, it's a lute and a choir. Relics played a significant role in both exorcism and divine healing. These were physical objects associated with saints, a bone fragment, a piece of clothing, or even soil from a holy site. It was believed that these relics held intrinsic spiritual power, capable of warding off evil and facilitating miracles. You might find a relic placed upon your body, or be given water that had been touched by a relic to drink. The mere presence of such an object was thought to be a powerful deterrent to demonic forces and a conduit for God's healing touch. It was like a medieval spiritual battery, constantly emitting divine energy. Imagine yourself in a quiet chamber, perhaps in a monastery or a noble household. Instead of a physician with a lancet, a musician approaches, perhaps with a lute, a harp, or a simple flute. The soft, resonant notes begin to fill the air, weaving a tapestry of sound around you. If you were agitated, the music might be slow and calming, designed to soothe your racing thoughts and bring a sense of peace. If you were melancholic, perhaps a more uplifting, yet still gentle melody would be played, intended to lighten your spirits and draw you out of your despair. It was a subtle, non-invasive intervention, relying on the power of vibration and harmony to mend the fractured mind. Oh, you're feeling a bit out of tune today. Let's try a little musical therapy. No, not that dreadful tavern song. Something more. Gregorian. Pilgrimages were another common form of spiritual intervention. If you were suffering from madness, a journey to a shrine dedicated to a healing saint such as Saint Dymphna, the patron saint of those suffering from mental illness, or Saint Bartholomew, who was believed to cast out demons, was often recommended. The arduous journey itself, coupled with fervent prayer and devotion at the shrine, was thought to cleanse the soul and bring about a miraculous cure. Imagine walking for weeks, perhaps months, enduring hardships, all with the hope that a saint's intercession would restore your mind. It was a physical and spiritual odyssey, a testament to unwavering faith. The common historical fact here is the ancient and persistent belief in the power of music, or mellotherapy, to influence health and temperament. Dating back to ancient Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato, who wrote extensively on the ethical and therapeutic effects of music. This idea was deeply ingrained in medieval thought. Music was not just entertainment, it was seen as a powerful force capable of affecting the humors, calming the passions, and even warding off evil influences. This tradition was preserved and expanded upon through the writings of figures like Boethius, whose De Institutione Musica was a foundational text throughout the Middle Ages. Emphasizing music's ability to restore order to the soul, an interesting, though less common, detail is the use of holy madness, or divine folly, as a concept. While most madness was feared and treated, some rare individuals who exhibited unusual behaviors spoke prophecies, or had visions were sometimes seen not as possessed or ill, but as divinely inspired. Their madness was interpreted as a sign of a special connection to God, a form of spiritual ecstasy. These individuals might be revered as saints or prophets, their seemingly irrational acts seen as manifestations of divine wisdom. It's a bit like the medieval equivalent of a performance artist, but instead of an art gallery, they're performing for God. This highlights the complex and sometimes contradictory ways in which mental states were understood. Beyond passive listening, active engagement with music was also encouraged. If your condition allowed, you might be encouraged to sing, to chant, or even to learn to play a simple instrument. The act of creating music, of finding your own voice within a melody, was believed to be profoundly therapeutic. It required focus, discipline, and a connection to an external harmony, all of which could draw the mind away from its internal turmoil. It's like a medieval karaoke session, but the stakes are your sanity. Historians still debate the extent to which medieval religious practices for madness were genuinely therapeutic or merely a means of social control and explanation for the inexplicable. Did the rituals of exorcism and the acts of penance provide a psychological release for the afflicted, offering a narrative and a path to recovery within their belief system? Or did they simply reinforce existing prejudices and sometimes lead to further suffering, or even death for those deemed possessed? Some scholars argue that the structured nature of these interventions, combined with the power of suggestion and community support, could indeed have had a calming or even curative effect for certain conditions. Others emphasize the dangers of misdiagnosing mental illness as demonic possession, which could lead to neglect of physical needs or even brutal treatment. It's like trying to decide if your grandmother's advice was wise because it was truly insightful, or because you just felt better after talking to her. Art, in its various forms, also offered a path to solace. While not as explicitly documented as music therapy, the act of engaging with beautiful objects, creating images, or even working with one's hands was implicitly understood to have a calming and restorative effect. Imagine being given simple drawing materials, charcoal, colored pigments, and parchment, and encouraged to express your inner world, or simply to copy beautiful designs. The focus required for artistic creation, the tactile sensation of materials, and the satisfaction of producing something tangible could provide a much-needed anchor for a mind adrift in madness. Consider the case of a young man, previously devout, who suddenly begins to blaspheme, tear at his clothes, and speak in voices not his own. The physician, having tried his humors and herbs, might declare it a case of demonic oppression. The family, desperate, would turn to the church. The exorcism might involve loud prayers, the application of sacred oils, and perhaps even the binding of the patient to prevent self-harm, or harm to others during the perceived struggle with the demon. The cure, as if it came, would be attributed to the power of God and the Church, a victory of good over evil. The role of religious art was particularly significant. Contemplating illuminated manuscripts, stained glass windows, or religious frescoes was believed to elevate the soul and provide spiritual comfort. For a melancholic individual, gazing upon images of saints or scenes of divine grace could offer hope and a sense of connection to something larger than their own suffering. The beauty and order of sacred art were thought to reflect the divine order of the cosmos, which, in turn, could help restore order to the individual's disordered mind. It was like a medieval art gallery, but every piece was designed to heal your soul. Beyond formal exorcism, everyday religious practices were also believed to offer protection and healing. Wearing religious amulets, reciting specific prayers, attending Mass, and receiving sacraments were all seen as ways to strengthen one's soul against evil influences and maintain spiritual well-being. If you felt a creeping sense of despair or irrational fear, you might be advised to increase your devotion, to spend more time in prayer, or to seek confession. The Church offered a constant source of comfort and guidance, a spiritual safety net in a world full of unseen dangers. An interesting, though less common, detail is the use of specific vocal tones and chants for therapeutic purposes. Beyond just the general concept of music, certain monastic orders, particularly those with a strong emphasis on Gregorian chant, believed that the precise pitch, rhythm, and intonation of the chants had specific vibrational qualities that could resonate with and rebalance the body's humors and the soul's affections. A physician might not prescribe music generally, but rather a specific chant or a series of vocal exercises to be performed daily, almost like a vocal prescription. It was less about the melody and more about the resonant frequency, like a medieval tuning fork for your soul. The concept of holy wells and other sacred natural sites also played a role. These places, often associated with miraculous healings, were visited by those seeking relief from various ailments, including madness. You might be instructed to bathe in the waters of a holy well, or to drink from it, believing that the sacred properties of the water, imbued by divine grace, would cleanse your body and mind. It was a blend of natural healing and spiritual faith, a pilgrimage to a sacred spring. Historians still debate the true effectiveness of music and art as therapeutic interventions for madness in the Middle Ages. While modern psychology recognizes the profound benefits of creative therapies, the medieval rationale was rooted in humoral and spiritual beliefs rather than neuroscience. Did patients genuinely improve due to the specific harmonies or artistic engagement? Or was it the calming environment, the distraction from internal suffering, and the belief in the method that provided relief? Some scholars argue that these gentle approaches, especially when combined with other forms of care, could have offered genuine comfort and a pathway to mild recovery for certain conditions, particularly those involving anxiety or depression. Others contend that while aesthetically pleasing, they were likely palliative rather than curative for severe forms of madness, serving more as a form of humane management than a true medical intervention. It's like trying to figure out if your favorite song makes you feel better because of the lyrics, or because it just reminds you of a good time. The role of confession was also crucial. If madness was seen as a consequence of sin, then confessing those sins and receiving absolution was a vital step towards spiritual healing. The act of verbalizing one's transgressions to a priest and receiving forgiveness could have a profound psychological impact, alleviating guilt and anxiety that might contribute to mental distress. It was a form of medieval therapy, albeit one with eternal consequences. Consider the case of a person suffering from profound agitation, perhaps prone to violent outbursts. While physical restraint or purges might be used, a physician might also prescribe a regimen of quiet, contemplative music, perhaps played by a skilled musician in their presence. The aim would be to gradually slow their racing thoughts and calm their nervous system, much like a modern sedative, but delivered through sound. The rhythmic repetition of certain melodies, with the gentle plucking of a harp, could provide a focal point, drawing the agitated mind away from its internal chaos. It's important to note that not all medieval scholars or physicians immediately jumped to a spiritual explanation for madness. There was a continuous, albeit slow, development of more naturalistic medical theories. However, when faced with symptoms that defied their humoral understanding, or when the patient's behavior seemed overtly blasphemous or violent, the spiritual explanation often became the dominant one. The two realms, medical and spiritual, were not mutually exclusive, but often intertwined, with the church often stepping in where medicine failed. The creation of crafts, even simple ones, also offered a form of occupational therapy. Weaving, spinning, embroidery, or even gardening could provide a structured activity that engaged the hands and the mind. The repetitive nature of some tasks, combined with the satisfaction of completing a project, could offer a sense of purpose and calm. For those whose madness manifested as extreme lethargy or withdrawal, such activities could provide gentle stimulation and a pathway back to engagement with the world. It was like a medieval craft fair, but the goal was mental well-being, not selling knitted cozies. The fear of eternal damnation also played a part. If madness was a sign of demonic influence, then it wasn't just your earthly well-being at stake, but your immortal soul. This added an immense pressure to seek spiritual intervention, to fight the perceived evil within, and to ensure that one's soul was pure before God. It was a terrifying prospect, adding another layer of anxiety to an already distressing condition. The concept of harmony extended beyond music to the very environment. A well-ordered garden, with its symmetrical paths, fragrant flowers, and soothing sounds of nature, was considered a therapeutic space. Patients might be encouraged to spend time in such gardens, to walk among the plants, or simply to sit and observe the natural world. The beauty and tranquility of nature were believed to have a restorative effect on the humors and the soul, providing a gentle counterpoint to the internal chaos of madness. It was a medieval version of forest bathing, but with more monks, and as you settle deeper into your sleep, consider the profound comfort, or perhaps the profound fear, that faith offered in the face of madness. The chanting of prayers, the scent of incense, the unwavering belief in divine power, all aimed at bringing peace to a troubled mind. Whether by expelling a demon or by cleansing a sinful soul, it's a testament to the human need for meaning and control in the face of the unknown. A journey into the spiritual landscape of medieval healing. The use of storytelling and poetry also falls under this umbrella of creative solace. Listening to tales, particularly those with moral lessons or comforting narratives, could provide distraction and a sense of order. The rhythmic cadence of poetry, or the engaging plot of a story, could capture the attention of a wandering mind and offer a temporary escape from distress. While not explicitly art therapy in the modern sense, it was a form of narrative engagement designed to soothe and uplift. You've journeyed through the physical and spiritual landscapes of medieval healing, from the sharp bite of the surgeon's knife to the comforting murmur of prayers. Now, as you continue to drift, let your mind turn upwards, beyond the flickering candlelight and the confines of earthly remedies, to the vast, mysterious canvas of the night sky. Imagine a world where the stars weren't just distant pinpricks of light, but active, living forces, constantly influencing your destinies, your health, and yes, even your sanity. This is where we examine how the alignment of stars and planets guided medieval diagnoses and shaped the very understanding of madness. The social aspect of music and art was also important. Participating in communal singing or observing a performance could provide a sense of belonging and shared experience, reducing the isolation often associated with madness. While severe cases might be secluded, those with milder forms of mental distress could benefit from being part of a group, even if only passively. It was a medieval group therapy session up, but instead of talking about your feelings, you were just enjoying a good tune. For the medieval mind, the cosmos was a meticulously ordered creation, a grand celestial clockwork designed by God. Every planet, every constellation, held specific powers and influences that trickled down to the earthly realm, affecting everything from the tides to the growth of crops, and, crucially, to the delicate balance of your own body and mind. Astrology wasn't seen as a mere superstition or a parlor trick. It was a legitimate, complex science, deeply intertwined with medicine. A physician who couldn't read the stars was considered incomplete, like a chef who couldn't tell a carrot from a turnip. The effectiveness of these methods was likely highly individualized. For some, the gentle rhythm of a chant or the soothing beauty of an illuminated manuscript might indeed have offered profound comfort and a pathway to recovery. For others, particularly those with severe, debilitating forms of madness, these approaches might have been little more than a fleeting distraction, Yet, their very existence speaks to a more nuanced understanding of mental suffering, one that recognized the power of the non-physical, the aesthetic, and the harmonious to influence the inner world. Imagine consulting your doctor, and after he's poked and prodded and perhaps even suggested a good purge, he pulls out not a medical textbook, but an intricate astrological chart. He's not just looking at your symptoms, he's looking at the precise moment of your birth, the current positions of the planets, and their relationships to the 12 houses of the zodiac. Was Mercury in retrograde when you started feeling a bit off? Perhaps Saturn, the melancholic planet, was casting a long shadow over your natal chart, exacerbating your black bile. It's like your cosmic weather report, but instead of telling you to bring an umbrella, it's telling you to prepare for a bloodletting. Oh, Jupiter's in your 3rd house, and you're feeling a bit irritable. That explains it. Clearly too much the yellow bile. We'll need to consult the stars on the best time for your next adjustment. And as you close your eyes, imagine the soft strum of a lute, the gentle murmur of a choir, or the quiet scratch of a pen on parchment, creating images that bring peace to a troubled soul. It's a comforting thought that even in an age of harsh remedies, there was a recognition of the subtle, profound power of beauty and harmony to mend the fractured mind, offering a surprisingly gentle path to mental solace. Each planet was associated with specific humors, temperaments, and even parts of the body. Mars, the fiery red planet, was linked to yellow bile, aggression, and hot inflammatory conditions. Saturn, slow and distant, was associated with cold, dry black bile, melancholy, and chronic ailments. Jupiter, expansive and benevolent, was connected to sanguine blood, optimism, and good health. The moon, ever-changing, influenced the watery phlegm and conditions related to fluidity and instability, sometimes even madness. Hence the term lunacy. Venus brought warmth and moisture, linked to love and pleasure, while Mercury, swift and intellectual, governed the nervous system and communication. It was a cosmic personality test, where your entire being was mapped to the heavens. You've journeyed through the medieval landscape of madness, from the humors and herbs to the surgical interventions, spiritual rites, celestial influences, lifestyle adjustments, early institutions, and even the soothing power of music and art. Now, as the final whispers of our story settle, let's reflect on the enduring legacy of these ancient practices and how they shaped, however imperfectly, our understanding of the human mind. This is where we explore a shifting understanding, the evolution of these practices, and the profound journey of humanity's quest to heal the fractured self. The common historical fact here is the profound integration of astrology into medieval medicine. It wasn't a separate discipline, but an essential component of diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment planning. Physicians were often trained in both medicine and astrology, viewing the celestial influences as fundamental to understanding the human body's inner workings. Medical astrology provided a comprehensive framework for explaining health and disease, offering a cosmic rationale for why certain individuals were prone to certain ailments at specific times. It was the ultimate holistic approach, encompassing the entire universe. Imagine looking back at this tapestry of medieval remedies, a complex weave of folk wisdom, classical theory, religious dogma, and desperate innovation. It's easy for us, with our modern scientific lens, to dismiss many of these practices as barbaric or superstitious. Yet, for the medieval physician and patient, these were not arbitrary acts. They were sincere, often courageous, attempts to make sense of and alleviate profound suffering in a world where the very mechanisms of the body and mind remained largely a mystery. They were working with the tools they had and the beliefs that defined their reality. So, if you were suffering from madness, the physician would first determine which humor was out of balance, and then consult the stars to understand why and when this imbalance occurred. And crucially, the most auspicious time for intervention. If your melancholy was linked to Saturn's influence, treatments aimed at warming and moistening your body might be prescribed, but only when Saturn's influence was waning, or when a more benevolent planet was in a favorable alignment. Performing a bloodletting when Mars was in a dominant position, for example, it might be considered too risky, as it could exacerbate the fiery humor. It was like trying to schedule a doctor's appointment. But the doctor also needed to check his astronomical almanac. The common historical fact here is that despite the scientific inaccuracies of humoral theory and the often harsh nature of treatments, the medieval period laid some foundational, albeit rudimentary, groundwork for future medical understanding. The emphasis on observation, the systematic categorization of symptoms even if based on flawed premises, and the development of organized care, however limited, all contributed to the slow, incremental progress of medicine. While they didn't discover the true causes of mental illness, they certainly tried to classify and respond to it within their intellectual framework. The timing of treatments was paramount. Operations, purges, and even the gathering of herbs were often timed to coincide with specific planetary hours or lunar phases. For instance, bloodletting might be avoided when the moon was in a bleeding sign like Aries or Taurus, as it was believed this would lead to excessive blood loss. Conversely, certain remedies for melancholy might be administered during the hour of Jupiter to enhance their beneficial effects. It was a precise, intricate dance between earthly remedies and cosmic rhythms, a celestial choreography of healing. As the Middle Ages drew to a close and the Renaissance dawned, a subtle shift began to occur. While humoral theory remained dominant for centuries more, new anatomical discoveries and a renewed interest in empirical observation began to chip away at its absolute authority. Physicians started to look more closely at the brain itself, rather than just the balance of fluids throughout the body. The concept of madness as a disease with a physical basis, rather than solely a spiritual or humoral one, slowly gained traction, though it would be a long, arduous journey. An interesting, though less common, detail is the concept of critical days in medical astrology. These were specific days in a patient's illness, determined by the moon's position relative to the patient's natal chart, that were considered turning points for better or worse. Physicians would pay close attention to these days, as they were believed to be moments when the body's humors were particularly susceptible to change, making interventions either highly effective or dangerously detrimental. It was like a medieval medical countdown, where certain days were red alerts and others were green lights. Well, today's a critical day, so we'll either cure you or you'll spontaneously combust. Fingers crossed. Imagine the first tentative autopsies, revealing the intricate structures of the brain, leading to questions about how these physical components might relate to thought, emotion, and sanity. It was a slow awakening, a gradual turning away from the cosmic and humoral explanations towards a more localized, anatomical understanding. The seeds of modern neuroscience were being sown, albeit in very rocky soil. It's like slowly realizing that the problem with your car isn't the alignment of the stars, but a loose wire under the hood. Historians still debate the true impact of astrological medicine on patient outcomes. Did the belief in celestial influences provide a psychological benefit, offering patients a sense of cosmic order and a reason for their suffering, thereby aiding recovery through a placebo effect? Or did it lead to delays in effective treatment, or even harmful interventions, due to misguided astrological timing? Some scholars argue that while the underlying science was flawed, the systematic approach of medical astrology provided a framework that, in a world without modern diagnostic tools, offered a sense of control and predictability. Others contend that it was a significant impediment to the development of truly empirical medicine, diverting attention from observable physiological processes. It's like trying to figure out if your old car ran better because you believed in it, or because you occasionally put gas in it. An interesting, though less common, detail is the emergence of early medical texts that, while still steeped in humoral theory, began to include more detailed case studies and observations of individual patients, rather than just general theoretical discussions. These texts, often illustrated, provided a glimpse into the specific symptoms and responses to treatments, offering a more nuanced, if still limited, understanding of mental afflictions. They were the very first steps towards clinical psychiatry, moving from abstract theory to concrete patient experience. It's like the medieval version of a medical journal, but with more drawings of leeches. Consider the case of a person suffering from what we might now call bipolar disorder, experiencing cycles of intense mania and deep depression. A medieval physician, observing these dramatic shifts, might attribute the manic phases to an excess of hot, fiery humors influenced by Mars or the sun, and the depressive phases to an abundance of cold, dry black bile exacerbated by Saturn or the moon. The treatment plan would then involve a complex series of interventions, timed according to the celestial calendar, to cool the fiery humors during mania and warm the melancholic ones during depression. It was a personalized treatment plan, but personalized by the stars, not by your unique biology. Historians still debate the precise turning point when the understanding of madness began its definitive shift from a predominantly spiritual or humoral explanation to a more neurological or psychological one. Was it the anatomical discoveries of the Renaissance, the philosophical inquiries of the Enlightenment, or the later asylum reforms of the 18th and 19th centuries? Some scholars argue that the shift was gradual and multifaceted, with different regions and intellectual traditions evolving at different paces. Others contend that while progress was slow, the seeds of modern understanding were present even in the medieval period, waiting for the right intellectual climate to flourish. It's like trying to pinpoint the exact moment your favorite band changed their sound. It was a process, not a single note. The influence of the stars wasn't just about the planets. It extended to the zodiacal signs. Each sign was associated with specific body parts and humoral tendencies. Aries, for example, ruled the head. So a headache or madness might be exacerbated when the moon was in Aries. Pisces, ruling the feet, might be linked to melancholic conditions affecting the extremities. This intricate web of associations meant that a physician had to be a master of both anatomy and astronomy. Connecting the microcosm of the human body to the macrocosm of the heavens, recall the various methods we've explored: the bloodletting to balance humors, the hellebore to purge black bile, the exorcisms to cast out demons, the astrological charts to time interventions, the specific diets to maintain equilibrium, the confinement in early institutions, and the soothing melodies of music. Each of these practices, however flawed, represented a human attempt to bring order to chaos, to alleviate suffering, and to restore a sense of self to those who had lost it. They were born of a profound human need to heal, a need that transcends time and scientific understanding. The concept of decumbiture charts was also crucial. When a patient first fell ill, a chart would be cast for that precise moment, and its astrological configurations would be used to predict the course of the illness and the most effective treatments. It was like taking a cosmic snapshot of your sickness, and then using that snapshot to guide your entire medical journey. Imagine your doctor saying, yes, you fell ill when Saturn was squaring your natal moon. That explains the extreme melancholy and the sudden urge to knit sweaters for squirrels. The medieval period also saw the development of a more formalized medical education system, albeit one still heavily reliant on ancient texts. Universities began to incorporate medical studies, and while practical training was limited, the intellectual rigor of these institutions helped to standardize, to some degree, the theories and practices of medicine. This laid the groundwork for future generations of physicians who would eventually challenge and overturn the very foundations of medieval medical thought. The medieval fascination with celestial bodies also extended to the idea of critical hours or planetary hours. Each hour of the day was ruled by a specific planet, and performing medical procedures during the hour of a benevolent planet was thought to increase the chances of success. So, if you needed a tooth extracted, perhaps because it was causing madness, as we discussed in Chapter 3, the barber surgeon might wait for the hour of Jupiter to ensure a smoother, more successful procedure. It added another layer of complexity, and perhaps a touch of cosmic drama to every medical decision. The enduring legacy of the medieval approach to madness lies not just in its specific treatments, but in its holistic perspective. While their understanding of the body was incorrect, they recognized the deep interconnectedness of physical health, mental state, spiritual well-being, and environmental factors. This holistic view, often lost in the specialization of modern medicine, is something that contemporary approaches are now striving to rediscover. They understood that a person was more than just a collection of symptoms. They were a complex being interacting with their world. Even the simple act of prescribing a diet could be influenced by the stars. Foods were categorized not just by their humoral qualities, but also by their planetary associations. A patient suffering from a Saturnine melancholy might be advised to eat foods associated with Jupiter or the Sun, warm, moist, and nourishing to counteract the cold, dry influence of Saturn. It was a cosmic culinary guide, where your dinner plate was a reflection of the heavens. Even the concept of asylum, however grim its early manifestations, represented a nascent recognition that those with severe mental illness needed a separate, dedicated space for care and protection. While these institutions would evolve into places of great suffering before their eventual reform, their very existence marked a societal acknowledgement of a specific need that could not be met by family or community alone. The idea of sympathy and antipathy between planets also played a role. Certain planetary alignments were considered sympathetic, enhancing positive influences, while antipathic alignments could exacerbate negative ones. A physician would carefully consider these relationships when planning treatments, trying to harness sympathetic forces and avoid antipathic ones. It was like a medieval cosmic dating app, trying to find the perfect planetary match for your healing journey. The shift in understanding was not a sudden revolution, but a slow, often painful evolution. It involved countless individual observations, the courage of those who questioned established dogma, and the gradual accumulation of new knowledge. It was a journey from seeing madness as a divine curse or a humoral imbalance to understanding it as a complex interplay of brain chemistry, psychology, and social factors. The influence of Arabic scholarship was particularly strong in the development of medieval medical astrology. Islamic scholars had preserved and expanded upon ancient Greek and Roman astrological texts, adding their own observations and interpretations. This knowledge flowed into Europe through centers of learning like Toledo and Sicily, profoundly shaping the intellectual landscape of medieval medicine. It was a global exchange of ideas, where ancient wisdom met new interpretations under the watchful eyes of the stars. And as you finally drift into a deep, peaceful sleep, let the echoes of these medieval practices fade into the quiet of the night. The scent of ancient herbs, the faint memory of a chanted prayer, the distant clink of a surgeon's tool. They are all part of a long, winding story of humanity's enduring quest to understand and alleviate the mysterious afflictions of the mind. It's a story that reminds us of our shared humanity, our persistent curiosity, and our unwavering hope for healing, and even in the darkest of times. Ultimately, for the medieval physician, the human body was not an isolated entity, but a vessel constantly interacting with the vast forces of the cosmos. Madness, therefore, was not just an internal malfunction, but a reflection of a disharmony between the individual and the celestial spheres. By understanding these cosmic influences, they believed they could diagnose the root cause of the affliction and prescribe treatments that were not only medically sound by their standards, but also cosmically aligned.